Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 16th of March, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
Well, we have a packed news today. Of course, much going on in the world, and a lot of people, I think, really beginning to just think to themselves, what is unfolding? Everything is genuinely chaotic. So in today's news, we are going to have a gentle work through what's happening and try and get in under the surface of the stone to really analyse what's driving what. So Iran is going to be our starting point because, of course, it's going from bad to worse. Ben is going to be having a look at sustainable markets and the work of our Green King. That should be fascinating, Ben. We're going to be having a look at the British Army and makeup for men. And yes, that's exactly what I said. This has been a small article in the UK press, but actually I think it has much, much bigger impact, as we will have a look. We're going to be taking a look into disruptive change agents. This is something, Ben, you've been warning about for a very long time. And of course, while people's minds are focused on the terrible things happening overseas, so that's the war in Ukraine and events in Iran at the moment, it's quite clear to the UK Column News team, at least, that we are being attacked. And that attack is not only on the pillars of the nation state here in the United Kingdom, but it's also on communities and families themselves. Now, Companies House is not something we talk about a great deal, but I can tell you that Companies House now requires the most intimate details from directors. It's not enough just to give your name and general identity and banking details. It's now into full digital ID. But Ben, apparently Companies House is not keeping our information secure.
Well, they've had a bit of a snafu.
They've had a bit of a snafu. We'll have a look into that. We're going to make a little bit of comment about AI and in particular ChatGPT and some of its failings. And we're also going to be having a look at public interest news, and Ben is going to be digging into the failings of those organisations. So let's get started. No better place to start than with our beloved Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Let's have a look at what he's been saying.
The conflict in Iran and across the Middle East is now entering its third week. So I want to take a moment to set out how we're responding to this crisis and standing up for the British people. Our priority is always the national interest. And so we have been clear and consistent in our objectives throughout this conflict. First, we will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution that brings security and stability back to the region and stops the Iranian threat to its neighbours. I want to see an end to this war as quickly as possible, because the longer it goes on, the more dangerous the situation becomes, and the worse it is for the cost of living back here at home.
Well, there we are. Keir Starmer made those remarks not long ago, a couple of hours ago now. I wasn't able to see more of what he said, but I'm going to comment on what he did say. And the interesting thing, of course, is that he's stressing he's standing up for people in Britain. He then says, but it's in the national interest. I can't help thinking, Ben, that actually this is where the problem lies, because when he says the national interest, people think he's talking about the United Kingdom. But in actual fact, I think he is talking about his global elite, the Davos elite, the people connected with Epstein. That's who he's actually talking about. as being in the national interest. So these people defending themselves. And he wants to bring a swift end to the war. I think there's two reasons for that. One is that it's clearly not going as well as it should, and Strait of Hormuz shut off, so big impact on oil prices in the world, but also things not going well for Israel and certainly not going well for the US. So all of a sudden the switch has got to be turned. It's no longer those nasty Iranians. We've got to stop the war as soon as possible. Cynicism is the key thing here, Ben, with this man, what he's talking.
Absolutely, yeah. And he seems to be flapping in the breeze a bit at the moment.
Oh, Keir Starmer, the flapper. I think this is probably a good description. Well, let's just focus for a few seconds on the BBC, because, of course, the BBC specialises in bread and circuses. And in these very dangerous, troubled times, the BBC over the last 24 hours has been wall-to-wall with the Oscars, and 6 Oscars won. It's also been looking at the dresses or the lack of them. So basically more and more nudity creeping into the Oscars. And what is all this designed to do? Of course, it's designed to keep people's minds off the really serious issue. So bread and circuses, a well-known tactic dating back to Roman times. Now, let's also have a look at another angle of how news compilation gets misused and abused. And I've just chosen here to have a look at the Kiev Post. And here's the headline: Russia's war driving global instability. UK statement by the UK chargé d'affaires, who's been speaking at the OSCE. So what an incredible statement. And I just wanted to highlight here that the article is by a gentleman called Adam Smith. He's a professional social researcher managing projects and producing reports for UK government departments and agencies. So I'm going to guess pretty close to the UK government. And is he going to make sure that his articles meet the government's overarching agenda? I would suspect he is, or probably he's not going to get paid, Ben. But what a remarkable statement as this war with Iran continues, unlawful war with Iran, that we're pointing a finger back at Russia and accusing Russia of the one creating the world instability. Now, say this one tongue-in-cheek, this is a UK column exclusive, so don't take this too seriously, but we're trying to make a point here. So what is happening at the moment? Well, of course, the Iranians have successfully closed the Strait of Hormuz. So this is shutting the strait to international oil traffic. About 20% of the world's oil movements are now locked because they can't move through. And we just want to say this has caused huge problems for the Americans. So Mr. Trump's had to send an email. Dear Xi, Vladimir, Ursula, and NATO, please help me police the Straits of Hormuz. Yes, we need to open it up from those nasty Iranians. From those nasty Iranians first, but that's just a minor problem. Donald, brackets, the real Trump. We're just putting a little bit of black humor over this and making this a UK column exclusive. But why is Donald Trump in such a fix? Well, there's a number of reasons, but one of the key reasons, as is being widely reported on social media, is it's very clear at the moment that both the Chinese and indeed the Russians are now using their full satellite surveillance capability in order to share information about the movement of US vessels. That includes the aircraft carriers and other military vessels surrounding Iran. But here we've got a view and the claim, I'm going to say it's a claim, that this is a satellite reconnaissance picture of the USS Tripoli bringing in the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit heading for the Gulf region with 3,000 American Marines on board. Now, of course, this advance notice and positional information of great help to the Iranians, but of course it's also undermining the whole of the American military effort because they're being watched reported and targeted on a 24-hour-a-day basis. So I'll just highlight this is the sort of accuracy, a lot more detailed than this, in fact, that can be achieved from space. So not surprisingly, Donald is looking a bit panicky and he's desperate for friends. Let's have a listen to what he said as he was on board Aircraft One.
We are talking to other countries about working with us for the policing of the strait. And I think we're getting good response. If we do, that's great. And if we don't, that's great too. Remember, like as an example, in many cases, the NATO countries, we're always there for NATO. We're helping them with Ukraine. And many instruments got a notion that between us doesn't affect us, but we've helped them. It'd be interesting to see what country wouldn't help us with a very small endeavor, which is just keeping the strait open. And by comparison, it's small because Iran has very little firepower. So whether we get support or not, but I can say this, and I said it to them, we will remember.
Well, there we are, fascinating little clip. I'll apologise for the noise, but of course that was the ambient noise in the background on the aircraft. It wasn't possible to clean it up anymore. In fact, it's gone out worldwide with the major media channels with that sort of quality. So that's not down to the UK column, but you could hear what he said. What was your take, Ben?
I think he's out of his depth. That was my impression of that little exchange there. He sounds like he's talking. What does he say? It's just a small endeavor. It's like just the small $1 million loan that he got. It's just a small thing. Just a small thing. It's not a small thing. It's not a property deal in New York. This is a war, right? This is a completely different order of issue, and he seems flustered.
He seems very flustered. And of course, the reality is, even with a third American carrier coming into the theatre, he's not doing the job. He's not crushing the Iranians. The strait is closed. Trump is in deep trouble. And now he's effectively begging for people who previously he'd been very rude about as allies to come and actually help him. Now, there's another problem. Let's just jump back to this video of a couple of weeks ago. I think this is the White House talking about problems in the war theatre with Iran and elsewhere, indeed.
However, the president in that post was pointing out that, unfortunately, we had a very stupid and incompetent leader in this White House for 4 years who gave away many of our best weapons for nothing, for free, to another country very far away by the name of Ukraine. So the president was pointing out how that was an unwise decision, but nevertheless, don't doubt the strength and the might of the American military.
So there we are. What does Trump need? Well, he needs somebody else to blame. Previous president gave all his weapons away. So unfortunately, he's not been able to hammer the Iranians into submission, and he's not been able to win the war in Ukraine. So that's how it's done. But if we really want to get a feel for how serious things are for the West due to this atrocious and unlawful war against Iran, let's have a look at Ed Miliband being interviewed on the BBC.
Well, it is very important, as you've explained, that we get the Strait of Hormuz reopened, and we have already been talking with our allies, including the US, about this. The Prime Minister spoke to European leaders about it last week. The Foreign Secretary was in Saudi Arabia talking to Gulf countries. So it obviously is something that we're looking at. We want to work with our partners on this.
So you are considering sending ships. What about drones?
I'm not going to get into the obviously operational details of what might or might not happen. I think it's a priority for the world that the strait is reopened. Obviously, the best and simplest way to do that is to de-escalate the conflict, and I think it's important to underline that. As you imply in your question, there are different ways that we could contribute, including with mine hunting drones. All of these things are being looked at but in concert with our allies.
So lots of unhappiness and stuttering there, because he knows that the Americans and therefore the West are in deep trouble here. He doesn't want to talk about sending ships, because that's nigh on impossible. He's talking about trying to clear mines. That's also nearly impossible, as we'll see. But let's get a bit of comment. Let's get a little bit of comment from Vice Admiral Duncan Potts, talking about, could we put a carrier in theatre? Should be video 1. Yeah.
To deploy usefully, it will, by definition, need an air group, which will be a mixture of capabilities, including rotary wing, very much adding to the force protection, especially in surface surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, contributing to anti-small, inshore fast attack craft. But the main thing against the type of threat, especially we're talking about in the Gulf, and possibly even the Eastern Mediterranean scenario, is assured force protection against air threats. So that is what it'll need. It'll need the logistics to go with it. The great advantage of an aircraft carrier is that it can move in time and space, but it needs fuel and other stores to be able to do that. So to give it its unique operating quality of going where it wants, when it wants, to do what it wants at a time and place of its choice, it does need a wider battle group around it, which provides everything from the prosaics of logistics, but also the wider power projection capabilities and force protection capabilities as well.
So the Admiral using quite a bit of military language there, but if we pull it apart, he's saying that the carrier obviously needs fuel with it, it needs a tanker, it needs stores, it needs supply ships as well. And to go into theatre, he says it very quietly, the aircraft carrier needs a battle group, that is a whole cluster of other ships, air defence ships, anti-submarine warfare ships, and others around it in order to protect the carrier. And of course, the UK's Royal Navy does not have these assets. So the expectation would be that if the carrier went into theatre, the Americans would have that additional burden. And Trump has now said very categorically, we're not interested in your carrier. And the reason is because it is no help to the Americans, because it comes as a vulnerable asset. It doesn't come as that battle group. Now, the other thing we need to consider is the mining aspect, which has now really come to the fore. And the key point is that the UK, that did have one of the most capable mining fleets in the world, or mine countermeasures warfare fleets, that has basically gone. It's been slashed by 50%. Mine hunters have been withdrawn from the Gulf. And so the sorts of assets that you see in this picture, these little ships that would be sending out divers and underwater drones in order to destroy mines, these are simply not available. Now, if you want a really excellent overview of Royal Navy mine hunting operations and how the thing has been devastated, have a look at Navy Lookout, but here it's saying that just 6 of the original 13 Hunt class mine hunters are left in service, and also the Sandown class, which are even smaller than the Hunts. There's only 7 of those left in service of the original 12 built for the Royal Navy. So the fleet decimated, and the UK cannot put these assets into the Gulf because it has no means of protecting these little ships. It has no means of protecting motherships if they're using those to do autonomous mine warfare, mine clearance in the Gulf. So at the moment, the West is completely paralyzed. The Americans can't move their fleet because of risks from shore-based attacks. We can't move the tankers through because of risks from mining, and the West simply hasn't got the capability to deal with these threats. Now, some of this you can see coming to the surface. This is BBC's The Security Brief, and there military and security expert Mickey Kay was on the Security Brief show a little while ago, really struggling because obviously he could not say what the truth was. He intimated that the West and the Americans weren't capable of dealing with the threat from Iran, but he couldn't say it because, of course, he was on the BBC and presumably being paid by the BBC. Now, if we get to the end of this segment, what is the one thing, of course, that everybody is beginning to worry about? It's the unpredictability and instability of Israel. And David Sachs here, AI and crypto czar to the Trump administration, is on record as saying Israel could get seriously destroyed, and you then have to worry about Israel escalating the war by contemplating using a nuclear weapon. And he went on talking about the danger of the weapon being used, saying it truly catastrophic, adding that there are a lot of really frightening scenarios about where escalation could lead. And I'll just end this segment by saying one of the key problems for us in the West is that, of course, Israel is absolutely censoring all and every reports of the damage it's suffering. Almost nothing coming out about the immense damage to Israel and facilities, and also the US facilities in the Gulf region, not only aircraft and drones, American aircraft and drones that have been shot down, but also key bases in each and every one of the key states bordering the Gulf, bordering Iran and the Gulf area. So America has suffered devastating loss of shore facilities, but of course we're not going to be told about this, so it's difficult to understand the actual situation on the ground and at sea. And of course that is reflective of the fact it's not going well for Israel and America. Ben, really bad times, but while people are focused on Iran and indeed Ukraine and those big global events, it's at home that we should really stay focused.
Absolutely, yes. At home for the British anyway, because a lot of the global agenda is being coordinated from here. Last week, we talked about it being Commonwealth Week. And in parallel with that, we were also treated to the prospect of the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which took place at Hampton Court Palace, inspired by the Great Exhibition of 1851. This is a great showcase of all of the new technology, the new products and new services that are going to be rolled out into the economic system as part of the Sustainable Markets Initiative. We've talked about this many times previously on the column. The SMI, as I'll call it for brevity, was launched in 2020 by Charles III, then Prince of Wales, as his contribution to the Great Reset, ultimately. This is the World Economic Forum agenda, and it is vast in scope. Last count, there were 27 separate work streams covering all major industries, the financial markets, insurance, really touches on every single part of the economic system. And the SMI itself is a grand convening of the top chief executives from the world's biggest companies, all aligned around this idea of directing capital and capability towards the top-down transformation of the global economic system in order to deliver something that is sustainable. And if we can get that just back on screen quickly, I want to just hone in on that word at the top there, sustainable, because people think that that means good for the environment. That's what we're told. That's how these people speak about this stuff. It's good for the environment. But my view is that actually means very profitable on an ongoing basis for the people participating in it, so they can sustain profits indefinitely. And to understand that, you just need to go and read their own documentation. So again, if we can get that on screen, we can see that the Terra Carta that was issued in 2021, that's the first sigil on the left-hand side there. And essentially what that relates to is, amongst other things, the financialization of nature, this idea that nature only has value if it exists on a balance sheet of a corporation. It also essentially usurps Magna Carta as well. Obviously, we talk about Magna Carta, the Great Bill of Rights that enshrines our inalienable rights as citizens of this country, essentially pushed aside by Terra Carta. And then a couple of years after that, Astra Carta, within which the king essentially claimed dominion over outer space. So he owns the astral realm, the earthly realm, everything in it and around it. And this is all playing out in the background while these wars are kicking off around the place.
Yeah, this is the key thing. This is not something that sort of comes and goes, and it's a little bit of an initiative. It's stupid and then it dies away. This is a sustained initiative. And while everything and anything else is going on, this initiative is being rammed through not only in into UK society, but societies in the West and indeed the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And what this does is it's twofold, ultimately. It's about concentration of wealth. And we talked about the fact that this is about the financialization of nature and turning nature into an asset class that can be traded. But at the same time that these new technological systems are being implemented, they're being used to create the apparatus for a 24/7 surveillance state. So this is smart cities, digital surveillance, and from space even, actually, which I'll come back to in a moment. But for now, let's just have a little listen to Jennifer Jordan Saifi, Chief Executive of SMI, talking a little bit about what they've been up to over the past few years.
6 years ago, His Majesty King Charles III, then the Prince of Wales, launched the Sustainable Markets Initiative along with the Terra Carta and Astra Carta mandates. Today, the SMI is the world's go-to private sector platform for turning sustainability into scalable, profitable growth. In 2025, we pivoted. Facing a shifting global narrative, we launched pragmatic, commercially driven pathfinders that build real markets, achieve rapid scale, and deliver measurable economic benefit. A year ago, at the midpoint of our journey, we brought over 400 of the world's top CEOs, innovators, and global leaders to Hampton Court Palace for the inaugural SMI Roundtables and Exhibition. The message that emerged was clear. Stay the course, but execute faster, smarter, and with sharper commercial focus. In 2025, we took the momentum global. In June, we attended Shipping in Norway, the Blue Economy and Finance Forum in Monaco, and the UN Ocean Conference in France. In July, we held our inaugural China Forum alongside the China International Supply Chain Expo, where global and Chinese CEOs discovered powerful synergies already reshaping supply chains worldwide.
I had to cut it there because she said synergies and I couldn't take any more. But the music was quite stirring, wasn't it? Do you feel excited about the potential for economic growth, Brian?
The music is always designed to be uplifting, probably relaxing as well for people. It's all part of the psychology for this sort of policy.
It is, yeah. But she's actually quite honest in the intro there because she says SMI is the go-to private sector platform to turn sustainability into profitable growth. So all the talk about sustainability, it's about money. And also she said that when they got together, I think it was last year, they said that they've got to stay the course but execute faster. So actually, again, it's sort of revealing that things aren't going quite to plan and they don't have any alternatives. So they just got to keep on going, but do it more quickly. And I think the wheels are starting to fall off this whole thing, to be honest with you. Also, we talked a bit about what sustainable actually means. You can just have a little look at some of the individuals and the organisations who are participating in this, which I think speaks volumes beyond the headlines that we've presented with. First one is this roundtable. This comes from last week, which was run around the issue of sustainable transport and logistics. They had two companies there. One was BYD, which is driving the electric vehicle transition. But then an important one is Fortescue, which is an Australian mining company, which is now moving into high value electrical products, essentially, and particularly in transportation. And it builds huge electric diggers for use in its mining facilities and that kind of thing. And for me, this is a perfect example of the hypocrisy at play in this organisation and this entire sustainability agenda, to be honest with you, right? Because Fortescue is here as part of the SMI, but then it also is undergoing legal action at the moment for what appears to be illegal mining in the Pilbara region. And this relates to the Solomon mine, which it's seeking to extract up to 80 million tons of iron ore a year. And in the process of establishing that, they destroyed a whole series of Aboriginal cultural assets. And
so not very sustainable.
Not very sustainable, not very nice and cuddly, right? And this is just one example, right? So, and it's not just Fortescue, it's all of these mining companies in Australia, but this is a particularly good example because of their involvement with SMI. So apparently we've got to trust these people around sustainability, but then actually they're perfectly happy to destroy the natural world, destroy indigenous culture, so that the chairman of Fortescue can be one of the richest Australians, and they turned £3 billion profit last year. Right. It's extraordinary when you see this stuff. And then another, just one more clip from SMI last week, because I think it's important to understand the level that they're going to in terms of their ambition for the type of infrastructure they're building, but also its capabilities. And this relates to the satellite networks that are going up in space right now.
Space is going to be incredibly useful to us in the future as it is now, but we're really just scratching the surface. We're already using satellite navigation systems, communication systems, for example, Earth observation that's helping us understand climate change. But in the future, space could be, for example, providing limitless solar-based power. It could be providing, a place to put all of our orbital data centers, which are huge energy consumers and thermal producers. So we're just scratching the surface of what space can do to benefit everybody back here on Earth. But it's an environment that will become useless if it becomes contaminated by debris. And also, we need to be very aware that every launch into space obviously is producing pollutants into the atmosphere, and every re-entry vehicle is also burning up, producing pollutants into the atmosphere. So we need to work together to work out how we can use space in a sustainable way.
Well, just incredible. You said to me while that video was playing, they're mad. And to me, this is exactly right. Highly intelligent people, but utterly mad, as if we would want to be surrounded by all of their pieces of mechanical and AI satellites.
That will govern us.
Which will govern us.
Going to govern us from space. And all based on a full global surveillance network that they've already built. And one of the most important things to understand about this, we talked about Epstein earlier, and we talked about the idea of the wars that are happening in the Middle East, particularly the current war in Iran, has been a distraction from the information that's come out over recent months regarding Jeffrey Epstein and his network, is that actually all of this, the entire global economic agenda around the transition to a new economy, this idea of greening the economic system, the institutional narratives that have been built up around this, the way that it's been embedded into compliance within central banking and elsewhere in the financial markets, the propaganda push to make this something that is supposedly desirable to the whole of humanity, and the enforcement mechanism that is going to make us comply with this stuff through central bank digital currency. All of it has its roots in the network surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. And we've directed your attention towards these articles previously from Escape Key. I'll do so again because they are absolutely excellent. Brian and I attempted to sit down last week to have a conversation about these, but the level of detail in them is so much that we need to have another crack at it. But essentially what it reveals is that this entire agenda, the greening agenda, the sustainable development agenda, comes from Epstein. So actually the headlines that we hear about Trump or Mandelson or Prince Andrew, as he was formerly known, or any of these other people, is really little more than a distraction from the fact that the whole system has been set up and designed and funded by people within this network. And that's what we're seeing playing out around us on a daily basis.
Truly remarkable. Of course, we understand the horrors of the children and the young women who were abused. But the people doing that were building something absolutely devastated in parallel with it. And this is, to my mind, why we now have the situation where, of course, with the war on or the attack on Iran, absolutely perfect for undermining the release of more Epstein files and more data as to what these people were really doing. So Escape Key doing some phenomenal work. UK column, we are going to dig into more of it to be able to demonstrate what Epstein and his co-conspirators were actually doing, and it's pretty phenomenal stuff. So do not let Epstein slide into the long grass because of other things. It needs to stay absolutely under the spotlight. Well, huge thank you as always to people supporting the UK column as members or making donations. We can only do this. We've only been able to do this over 20 years with your financial support. We'd like to not only keep going, we want to build the column, and to do that we need new members and new people supporting the column so that we can expand. If you like what we're doing and you're not yet a member, please consider joining. And if you go to the website, of course, you can click the button to get details of how to join as a member. Don't forget, we've also got the UK column shop for purchases if you'd like to support us in that way. Now, announcement that German warfare tonight at 7 p.m. will be Don't Fight the Government's Wars. That seems to be a really pertinent topic. And coming up, we've also got Silk and Steel tonight at 9 p.m. The Unravelling, How Trump's Iran War exposed the empire's hollow core. So 2 really timely episodes there for you to have a look at. Now, also just want to give a mention. I had an email from a lady, Christine, who said, will you give a shout out for the fact that there's challenges happening to the crime and policing bill, and these are amendments about removing the abortion up to birth clause and reintroducing medical consultation in order to obtain abortion pills. And this seems a worthwhile subject to us. If you want more details, have a look at our show notes after the news, but also the address there is on screen, righttolife, all one word, .org.uk. Well, let's move on to key headline, and this is it. The Daily Mail, as war rages in Iran, woke MOD asks troops, guys, do you want to wear makeup and nail polish? Now, I believe that this is one of the most significant headlines that's popped up in the last couple of weeks, certainly while the war against Iran has been raging. But why do I think it's so significant? It comes down to little details in the article itself and a whole lot of information which Mark Nichol, the defence editor for the Daily Mail, either couldn't or wouldn't get involved with. So this is one of the key comments that the article made, and it's from Marc Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister. And he said this: upgrading to mascara from camouflage cream is highly likely to deter Putin. Now, I'm going to say, Ben, this is one of the classic comments that MPs love because it's dismissive. Well, it's a whole range of things. It's flippant, it's dismissive and dangerous, and it ignores the reality of what the woke agenda has done, the damage it has done to the armed forces. So if we dig into this deeper, the article also has from an army spokesman, apparently the comment made by Sir Roland Walker, Chief of the General Staff. And what did he have to say? He said the army is focused on enhancing our lethality and fighting readiness. There are no plans to change policy, and this was not an official army survey. Now, I'm going to come straight back in here with the question. It wasn't an army survey. There's something wrong here. He's either ignorant of what was happening or he's involved in deception, or this is a sloped shoulders, it wasn't me gov. But before we dig in a little bit deeper to what's really been happening here, let's have a listen to the General talking about what he is going to do with the Army.
As I prepare to take responsibility for the British Army, I recognise that the thinking and design of the 5th Gen British Army has largely been done and is in delivery. This will continue. I absolutely recognise the importance of continuity when it comes to our programme of record. The only real measurement of an army is its fighting power, its lethality in the face of very real and converging threats. In the near term, my challenge to the British Army is to double that lethality in 3 years and treble it by the end of the decade. Now, the major hardware systems are in train, and I want to make it clear that the 4+1 of electronic warfare, uncrewed systems, air defence, long-range fires, plus logistics and stockpiles remain the stars to steer by. My focus in the near term will be on making what we've got work even better. Essentially, the software that exploits the data to turbocharge our modernisation. And in this way, I think we can make huge gains in our ability to sense threats, make decisions, and change the facts on the ground to our advantage. We cannot do this alone. We need a new partnership with you, for us, a partnering mindset and role for healthy challenge therein, not least as we try to move from exhaustive requirement setting towards a software-first, model-based systems engineering approach to modernisation. We must get our tacticians alongside your technicians to drive spiral development. And there is a need for everyone at all levels to track backwards and forwards from the foxholes to the factory floors. And I can assure you that I will lead by example. I am committed to driving UK prosperity through our land industrial strategy.
So I don't know whether our audience picked up on everything he was talking about, because he said some quite amazing things, but he ended there saying that part of his job was the prosperity of UK, not only defence, but he's apparently involved in helping the prosperity of UK, and then he's already mentioned the fact that logistics and stockpiles are very important. Well, he was saying that way back then, but we now know that they're absolutely vital, because this is what has absolutely hammered and hampered the ability of the UK to get involved in war overseas, because we do not have the weapons and munitions and stockpiles in order to do that. Never mind the rights and wrongs of whether we should be getting involved. We're talking about what is being done behind the scenes with our military. So this man focusing on a spiral approach, he says, and that we're going to be looking at unmanned vehicles. Well, we can't use unmanned mine hunting vehicles in the Gulf because they simply can't be got into theatre, because there's no weapon systems in order to secure air defence in order to move into theatre. So although this man is army, what he is saying is coming unravelled, because it's very clear that UK doesn't have the power to do it. Now, let's come back on the subject of hairbrushes at dawn, as a few of our viewers have commented on today. And this is the key topic. He says that the diversity and inclusion questionnaire was nothing to do with him. But if we look on the Army's website, we will find that it's absolutely plastered with information about diversity and inclusion. And if we bring a little bit of it on screen, we can see here that the Army's D&I end state here, an army that is justifiably recognised as demonstrably inclusive employer that respects difference, attracts talents from all areas of society, overtly embraces equality of opportunity, and always challenges unacceptable behaviour. The Army must stand out as an inclusive employer, one that values diversity, attracts talent from all areas of society, overtly embraces equality of opportunity, and consistently challenges unacceptable behavior. So this is embedded in the army. It's equivalent to a military woke industry. We've got unit level diversity and inclusion strategy advisors, unit level. We've also got speak out and mediation services connected with this. So if we bring in a bit more detail, it tells you that speak out signpost service personnel to suitable contacts in their units to enable the problem to be addressed. And we've also got this one here, which is the Army Mediation Service. And the whole of this system is throughout the Army structure. So the idea that a survey asking whether men should be able to wear makeup on an equivalent basis to women to meet the trans agenda, that he doesn't know about it. This simply can't be true. And if we have a look at the structure through the military, and I'll say I took a little bit of help here from AI because it's so difficult to see what is actually happening. We can summarize it for you on screen now. So diversity and inclusion is embedded in the Army. It's at unit level. We've got Army personnel attending Defence Academy courses to serve as diversity and inclusion advisors and practitioners. We've got a mod strategy to conduct equity and justice. The Conduct, Equity and Justice Directorate, which gives diversity and inclusion policy across defence and supports staff networks. And we've also got the networks themselves, an internal diversity network system covering race, gender, disability, which feeds into policy discussion. So I'm going to say once again, the idea that the commander-in-chief, effectively the boss of the army, didn't know what was happening. This is plainly ridiculous. So this is layered through the British Army, and it is resulting in such mad things as the survey we've mentioned at the start of this segment. But here's the detail. This layered system provides both strategic and operational support for diversity and inclusion, shaping culture and advising commanders while separating formal regulatory authority from policy influence and behavioural change work. So let's reinforce what we're actually learning here, that basically this is set out so they can shape the culture in the army to become more woke. They can advise commanders to allow them to push the policy through. But at the same time, it separates proper discipline and control in the army from the mechanism that is producing the policy influence and behavioural change work. Ben, it took me a little bit of time to get my head around it, but what we're actually seeing is that the destructive policy, men and women are to become like each other. They can wear the same clothes. They can use the same toilet facilities or showers. That's where it's going. This is being driven in under the noses of the people controlling the military or the army. They are not fully aware of what's happening because it's deliberately set up where there's a separation in powers. And if we follow this through, earlier I mentioned the Defence Academy as training people. So here we are. Notice the photograph. I've been cynical in the labelling here because I've said meet the boys and girls from the Defence Academy of the United Kingdom. The photograph is significant because you've got 4 women and 3 men, which of course does not recognise the ratio of men and women in the armed forces. So this photograph itself is part of the reframing towards the new woke agenda. If we have a little bit more detail on the Defence Academy, it's offering short and long-range courses consisting of face-to-face, digital and blended learning. It's also talking about English language instruction, export courses in leadership, building integrity and reducing the risk of corruption. That sounds interesting from the UK government. But then they say this: our purpose is to help those who study with us and their nations to develop the intellectual edge needed to run successful government departments and military operations. But the point is, the UK cannot run its own armed forces and military supply chains, and yet we have the British government paying in order to be training other nation states to do this. When you pull it apart, Ben, it's mind-blowing what's actually happening here. The country is being ripped apart, but our money is being used supposedly to train people in other nations to be what? Better than we are in a military sense. Think it through. This is another academy linked into leadership and woke agenda for the armed forces, this time linked to the Royal Air Force. This particular lady is shown as the Commandant, Group Captain Emma Keith, BA MSc RAF. And if we look at her in a little bit more detail, we find something very interesting, because apparently she won a national award as a agent of change for her work at the college, which brings us back to you, Ben, because of course this is absolutely what you've been warning about. The placed agents of change are actually destroying the institutional foundations, in this case, the armed forces, and this is being done under the noses of the men and women who are trying to make a functioning military system. And this isn't just happening in the military, it's also happening through other elements of the country, including the court system, including the NHS, including the police.
The whole society.
It's the whole of society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, change agents everywhere. Everyone a change maker. There's a charity that has that as their
Slogan.
charity. Yeah, exactly. They want everyone to be a change maker. You know, the overriding impression I got from that section, Brian, was that this is not a fighting force. This is a bureaucracy.
Well, that's absolutely true. And if you look at the language of senior military personnel, their whole language has changed from what it was 20 years ago. Yep. They used to be very factual and precise in the language they used, but now you're hearing them more and more using this sort of it's sort of like a futuristic business development speech.
Yes.
Instead of language that absolutely represented the military and what the military was trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All approved by the Conduct, Equity and Justice Directorate. No doubt. I quite enjoyed that. And there are, as we said, many more of these across any large organisation in the country, not just in this country, but certainly in this country, is absolutely riddled with this stuff, and they're pushing it out more broadly into society as well. One of the mechanisms for that is this organisation, and I talked about UK community foundations over the past 2 weeks as it relates to their involvement with what's happening in the farming system right now. But just a few days ago, they announced the launch of this new programme, Lead the Change. So this is a collaboration, as these things always are. It's never one organisation. It's always a network of them. I think this is about spreading their influence and also avoiding accountability for what they're doing. But you've got the BBC in there via Children of Need. You've got DCMS, the Department for Culture and Media and Sport, on the right-hand side at the top there. You've got Esme Fairbairn Foundation, who we talk about quite a lot because they're very active in Plymouth, amongst other places. And because their chairman is directly linked to the Rothschild Foundation. So you can get a sense of the types of people and organisations that we're dealing with here. And what are they up to? And what's this fund all about? So it's a £3.4 million 3-year initiative to support young people to build stronger communities across the UK. This is very much like what you just described happening at a unit level in the army.
Yeah, and the stronger communities doesn't mean communities in the sense that most people would imagine that. It means communities that are running to the policy agenda of this sustainable overarching policy that we've been talking about. So this isn't going to help communities. This is just going to stamp control through those communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And destabilise the existing communities so they can be replaced with something else, I think, it seems to be what's at play here. Just to continue with the quote from the release, it says, a growing body of research shows that many young people feel disconnected, less heard by decision makers. This idea that young people should always be heard by decision makers, this is a new thing, and increasingly cautious about expressing themselves, especially online, where exposure to polarizing or harmful content can be widespread. It continues saying, combined with financial pressures facing families and communities, these factors can deepen isolation and weaken young people's sense of belonging. Our commissioned research by More in Common with 13 to 18-year-olds across the UK living in communities experiencing polarisation and division confirmed these insights. So the country's divided. The only reason that we know that is because we commissioned More in Common to do some research for us. More in Common is run by Brendan Cox, who's a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. And I spoke about him a few weeks ago because he's involved in these social transformation programs across the board writ large, right? This is just yet another example of it. And this program has got 5 key objectives that they're pursuing. One is to strengthen community connection and safety. Two is empower young people as leaders, storytellers, and change makers. So actually, they're going to recruit young people into this program, fill them full of ideas and self-confidence so that they can go out and tell different stories about the society that we all live in.
And the path to change will have been already put into their minds by the people who trained them in the first place. So this is where this becomes so insidious.
Yeah, absolutely. The third point is support young people to build digital literacy and challenge harmful narratives. So you've got to challenge harmful narratives, right? So probably things that we say on the UK column, those would be harmful narratives. So we've got to train these young people to basically operate like little Stasi agents, go around correcting everyone who's engaging in wrongthink. Number 4 is to increase opportunity for young people through skills and leadership pathways. So we've got to accelerate these young people in our program into positions of authority in companies or in politics, or wherever it might be. And then the 5th point, which is a really critical one, is to build a national movement for youth-led connection and change. I actually think that this, and this is just an example of what I'm seeing across the whole system at the moment, is probably going to ladder up to some kind of astroturfed, supposedly youth-led colour revolution in the next year or two. I think that's where things are heading to.
Yeah, to have everybody at each other's throats. And then, of course, the proper regime or the desired regime is stamped in over the top of that.
Exactly. And these networks have been established, funded, trained, put all around the country, in this instance in 17 different locations, including, we can just get that up on screen, in Plymouth. So Devon Community Foundation's part of this.
Yes.
So no doubt we'll see some action here over the coming months and years.
People focused overseas on all these horrific events and the wars, but actually what's happening in UK is we're being attacked by our own government, which is dismantling the country, dismantling the constitution, dismantling the main supports of that constitution, the police, the armed forces, the NHS, the court system. All of this is being undermined and destroyed. And then the intention is to bring in this new sustainable system of government, which is sold as being nice and for the benefit of mankind, saving the planet. It's just becoming more and more obvious how this attack is working.
Yeah, to deliver justice. That's what they use this term all the time. Just and inclusive means that, well, it's certainly not just, and inclusive means you can't escape it. Yeah.
Right. I thought we had one here before we got on to, let me just have a look where we are in slide. Well, we're into Company's House here, Ben. So do you want to just take us through that?
Yeah,
bit?
sure. So we'll crack on with this one. As a part of the new sustainable, inclusive system that we're being migrated towards is that it's all built on digital technology, and the system knows absolutely everything about us. And apparently this is all fine. But it seems that the UK government can't even run a fairly simple website without experiencing a major security breach, and Company's House actually had to take its website offline over the weekend because of its online filing service, is coming from the FT, was closed after a glitch allowed members of the public to view and change directors' personal details, potentially exposing them to fraud or other criminal activity. And there are more than 5 million companies on the UK's official corporate register, including those of the largest FTSE 100 companies such as AstraZeneca, Shell and Tesco. So basically what this means is if you were on the Company's House website, there was an issue which meant that I could log in as a director of any other company and make changes and have access to all of the personal information on there. Extraordinary.
Ben, the reason this is so incredible, of course, over the last year, Company's House has bullied every director, every company in the country to sign up digitally with them. I mean, this is more or less full fingerprint and iris scan. This is to do with your digital identity, your driving license, your passport. Company's House has hoovered up all of that detailed personal data on the basis that they need it in order to keep the public in the UK safe from fraud and criminal activity. So they took all the data, and then the next thing is they've demonstrated they're not capable of conducting the security of that data, and there's been this massive breach. It's truly incredible.
It is incredible. Just an eye on time. We got a couple of minute video. I've already described it, but we can show it in action. Let's just have a little look at this clip and show you exactly what we're talking about.
This is the Company's House dashboard. Lets you see the details of a company, edit details of the company. This is Tax Policy Associates. Of course, it's a company I own, so no surprise I can see it here. Here's the trick. I'm going to click File for a different company. Now, at this point, I could enter any company in the UK. I'd love to demonstrate this with Tesco or Marks and Spencer's. I'm worried I'd be committing an offence under the Computer Misuse Act. So I'm using a company which I have nothing to do with, but it's owned by a friend. He's given me his permission to do this, so this is authorised. 09792296. The most difficult part is typing the number. Continue. This is the company, my friend's company. Confirm and continue. Now, at this point, obviously I don't have the company authentication code because I'm nothing to do with this company, so I can't possibly go forwards. What happens if I go back and back and back? And now I'm seeing the dashboard for my friend's company. I can see his personal email address. I can see his address. It's even worse because what I can do, I could file accounts. I can change things. Here. I can actually update his address if I wanted to. And we've tested this. We actually, in another video, the person who discovered the vulnerability, with my permission, changed my address at Company's House. I needed to update it anyway. It was actually handy. But he should not have been able to do that. I think you can probably file company accounts. Here, I could get in here. I could change his details. That's insane. And all I did to do this is I went back twice. There was no preparation, no setup, no hacking at all. I just pressed the back button twice.
Pretty incredible stuff, Ben. And what comes into my mind, of course, is that we've got the same vulnerabilities to all of our medical data, but with the added danger, of course, that a lot of NHS data has now been handed to Israel with its preponderance of the use of its own security services in order to monitor and process data on people outside of Israel. truly worrying.
It is truly worrying, and I do wonder whether this event is actually going to have any impact at all on the narrative that we're constantly being fed, that digital ID is going to be fine, and people like Alexander Ayasad, who we can see here from the Blair Institute, constantly putting out these little video clips saying how fantastic it all. There's nothing to worry about. Actually, it's the opposite. It's more secure to do things this way. I wonder if they're going to change tack on the back of this real world evidence that what they're pushing us into doesn't really work. I don't know, probably not.
Well, we're going to watch it very closely, but of course, forewarned is forearmed. So this is the main thing for people, not only in UK, but worldwide. If you know what's happening, if you can see how it's being done, that gives you the best chance of countering it. Let's just end on the subject of ChatGPT. This is serious, but of course it's a little bit of black humour. Over the weekend, I had calls to challenge ChatGPT because it was giving me answers that I eventually said, what you're giving me is not fact, it's propaganda. And this is what ChatGPT had to say to me, was this: the real limitations of systems like me, ChatGPT, the real limitation isn't that I'm deliberately repeating propaganda, it's that I don't have direct experience. I can't independently investigate institutions. I rely on patterns in available information. That means I can explain what different sources say, but I can't replace the judgment of people who have actually worked inside those systems. So I'm going to be nice to the little robot and say, well, thank you very much for admitting that. But of course, what it tells us is that if the body of information that these AI algorithms can search is full of propaganda from the government or its aligned charities or NGOs, then what comes out of the little AI robot's mouth is also going to be heavily skewed and misleading information. But perhaps there's a good note there that at least ChatGPT was prepared to admit its own shortcomings, but people need to understand what they're dealing with here when they're getting this AI and equivalent AI systems to search data. It will skew its answer to meet the bias and the propaganda that is in the documentation already in the databases. And of course, if you have a government that works on propaganda, like the British government, the AI systems are going to be a tool of the government. They're not going to be a tool of the people asking the questions unless you learn how to ask the AI system the right question. So I'm going to end there because I think we're ending on a positive. Lots of nasty things going on in the world, but the good news is many people are digging, lifting stones, and that is making a difference. And Ben, you've intimated once again that the big, powerful globalist organizations are desperately worried they're missing their time slots to have particular policy in place. And that is as a result of pushback by millions and millions of people worldwide. So don't sit and just take it. Get up and challenge the system. Ben, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brian.
And interesting news. We must end there. For UK Column members, we'll be back in just a few minutes for UK Column Extra. Otherwise, UK Column News will be at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.